This is my backyard, and this is a sun, a lazy freeloader that's been hanging out in my backyard for years, dumping its heat load on the pavement while not actually helping with anything. But today I have a job for it. I'm going to build a machine to make it dump its load of heat into this pressure cooker, which I can then eat for dinner. Thank you to NordVPN for sponsoring today's video. Looking online, I'm obviously not the first to try cooking with the sun, but most of the setups I've seen, it looks like a mess of a procedure. Devices to rotate things, huge parabolic dishes that set you on fire when you stir the pot, and also having to babysit the food so it doesn't burn. All this to only end up with a tiny portion of food that looks like a breeding ground for some foodborne parasite that's going to crawl through your intestines and eat your urethra. My goal is some kind of simple setup that can cook a big family meal with no fuss. Just leave it in the sun, come back later, and it's ready. A common experiment is to use a large Fresnel lens to focus the light. This looks like a nice, easy to store option, but the problem I'm seeing is they heat from the top, which isn't suitable for any typical cookware. Plus they create hotspots and waste a lot of heat. But I think I've got a plan. So let's pretend this is the sun, and this is our food going off in the sun. My idea is maybe we can use a Fresnel lens setup like this, but instead of trying to melt the lid of the pot, we can use the mirror to reflect the focus light onto the bottom of our meal. Then my other thought, which is either the best idea in the world or the stupidest, is to use a pressure cooker instead of a traditional pot, which has a bunch of secret advantages I'll share later. But apparently the other benefit with this setup is if we scrub through the footage, we've created a rave for cookware. Now, experiments with these things is something I've wanted to do since before YouTube was even invented. When I was a kid, I found this overhead projector lens in a bin, and have been hoarding it ever since. But playing with these things is really what taught me how much power you can get out of something that is effectively a giant magnifying glass, and also how flammable trampolines are. These lenses do make everything upside down though, so you just have to turn it. Fast forward a decade to around 2010, where I found this broken rear projection TV on the side of the road. Now these things have all sorts of goodies in them, including these 3 lenses, which are cool for doing stuff, a super efficient mirror, and an even bigger Fresnel lens they use for the screen. These big screen TV lenses work really well with the sun, partly because their square ratio is the same as the sun. So after storing it for all these years, we can finally have some fun with it. Compared to the overhead projector lens though, it's slightly diffused because its purpose is to have images projected onto it. But the sheer size of it should be more than enough to focus the heat. So let's build a frame and stand for this lens. I've got the cheapest, crappiest wood I could find, which was perfectly straight. So I didn't want to permanently glue the lens into the frame in case I wanted to do something else with the lens later. But I also didn't want to do anything too fancy to frame this up, so I've got a rebaked router bit, which I'll use to make a nice step in the wood, which will hold the lens in shape and stop it flexing about. Trying to do it with my fingers was pretty shit, so I used a router instead. I thought it'd be easier to do the whole length of wood now in one run, rather than after I've cut the frame to shape. It's been a while and I forgot just how unpleasant it is to use routers. At one point, a chunk of wood flew off and hit me in the manberries. But in the end, I managed to get a flawless rebate in the length of the timber. Then I measured up the lens, and as the old saying goes, measure once and then cut several times, which I did. So now I have lots of spare short pieces of wood. So it turns out part of my brain was making a miter joint and part of it was making a butt joint. So then I ended up with this corner, which was also the wrong size. So I had to cut a few extra pieces of wood. I then assembled the frame by putting some screws through the loose knots in the wood. I figured apart from the amazing strength it will provide, the texture of the knots will also hide the screws, especially when they fall out. With that done, I then had to reroute the edges of the timber, but after that, the lens just dropped into place after about an hour of chiseling. After screwing the lens in, we then had ourselves a nicely framed up lens. Now we need a stand for it. I wanted something that would fold away for easy storage. So instead of going for an upside down T, I went for an upside down V, which is Greek and actually makes an L sound. But I guess they call this an A in English, or an A in Australia. The height had to be really specific due to the focal point, so I kind of just winged it at about this height. Then with some angles cut on the wood, we had a kickstand for our lens, and then just a little bit of string added to stop it doing the splits halfway through cooking dinner. I'm pretty happy with this result. We can angle it towards the sun, and it also folds in and stores nice and flat. Before making the other parts, I was really keen to see what this giant magnifying glass could do in the sun. So I moved it outside and tried it on my feet. Then I used a piece of foam to work out the focal point, forgetting how stupidly bright it would be. Knowing the focal point, I used a steel plate on some blocks of wood to stop the ashes from my arm dirtying the concrete. First up, I thought I would give it a go on a piece of wood. Wow, that's so quick. It's boiling the sap out. Well, okay, this thing is putting out a lot of heat. It's very focused, but I thought I'd try it out on these lead sinkers I found at the beach to see if I can make a dive weight out of them. Well, the bits of fishing line in there's burning off already. Oh, the little one's already melting. That's so quick. Oh. Try and focus on the big one here. Oh, there it goes. The big one's going. It's going. I didn't think it would melt that quick. So that took seconds. Oh, there it goes. Woo. All right, what's this guy doing? You missed out on the fun. So that turned out good. I'm really happy with my new dive weight. Compared to the one from the shop, you can barely tell the difference. Now we're onto our mirror. I'm using one that came out of the rear projection TV. I tried to get a shot of it here, but then I remembered it's a mirror. But these mirrors are actually pretty awesome. They're known as front surface mirrors. So normally with a conventional mirror, there is a reflective surface and then a piece of glass in front of it, so you have to stand behind the mirror for it to work. But a front surface mirror not only allows you to stand in front of it, but there's no glass between you and the reflected image. So there's no ghosting like you get with the conventional mirror. I'm guessing these mirrors are slightly more efficient as well because there's no glass that the light has to travel through. I made up a frame to hold the mirror, which basically just looks like a pallet. I couldn't really think of a good way to hold the glass in place and figured drilling it would be a bad idea. So I thought I'd have a go at simply using some panhead screws with a bit of sprinkler tubing on the thread just to make it a bit softer, and then just gently tighten them down. I double checked the focus distance of the lens using a torch and a piece of foam, and then tried to work out the approximate height the mirror would need to be. With some very loose measurements, that I know will probably be wrong, I made up the legs in the conventional upside down T design, after using the cut twice technique for the frame so many times. It turned out really well in the end, and the family are loving how I can add additional light to the house.
Oh God, it's back again!
Now to cook our food, I'll be using this pressure cooker, which I picked up second hand, which included syphilis. So I've never actually used one of these before, but the concept is pretty cool. Basically, they can cook food faster with less energy than a normal pot. I think this could be the perfect solution for solar cooking of large meals that won't require me to be standing next to a pot in the sun. But they are also pretty scary at the same time and have a bit of a dodgy reputation. So usually the problem you have with cooking anything in water is that at 100 degrees Celsius, the water turns to vapor. At that point, it's then not adding any additional heat to the food, while also making a lot of air pockets where stuff can burn on the bottom. But with the pressure cooker, the sealed pot increases the pressure, which stops the water from vaporizing into bubbles until it reaches higher temperatures. This allows you to get a lot more heat transfer from the water into the food, which you can't achieve with a regular open pot. The risks you have though, if you were to force the lid open while there's liquid inside above 100 degrees, the sudden drop in pressure makes the water in it boil instantly, which can be quite explosive. The other problem is, if the pressure release valve blocks up, it can build up way too much pressure. Unchecked, this could potentially destroy the entire Earth, and possibly even Mars. But not Jupiter, because he's too tough, and he doesn't give a crap about our Goldilocks zone bullshit. But for those reasons, I went for quite a late model pressure cooker, which appears to have 3 levels of failsafe. None of which were likely designed for use in a solar furnace, but let's move on. Now to hold the pot in place and hopefully shield my eyes from the focused retina burning sunlight, I'm going to use the side panel of my computer case. I've marked out a hole the size of the pot and then cut a hole so the bottom of the pot is just peeking out through its new toilet seat. So the pot will be heated by intense sunlight, but its shiny bottom will reflect too much of the energy. To absorb infrared light better, I've put tape around the bottom and then dragged the brightness slider all the way down. To hold the pot off the ground, I found that the stand I made for my death ray in my last video was the perfect height. I just need to take the yoke off and then mount it sideways. To bend the eye shield up, I went over to my parents' house where my dad has this old foreskin remover, which made it easy to shape. I wanted to try the full setup in the sun, but some cloud rolled in due to this weather merry-go-round going on up north. So just to check I got the focal distance right, I used the next best thing to the sun, which is this old school halogen film light. It's shaped up pretty good, but in setting this test up, I also noticed that the mirror actually adds quite a hazard to the whole concept, so the shield around the pot will definitely be necessary to not accidentally scorch your eyeballs. That is actually hot. Now we have to be safe with this, but just like these welding gloves keep me safe from burns, and these goggles protect me from the intrusive thoughts, NordVPN keeps my data and privacy safe from hackers, malware and trackers, and they've kindly sponsored today's video. So I've been using a VPN for over 10 years now, so since before it was cool. Why? Because I've never been a fan of the idea of my data being up for grabs while I'm browsing online. And that's why I use NordVPN. It's easy to set up and it works on everything. Your PC, laptop, phone, even the old 80s TV that I've got, as long as I tape my phone to the front of it. It's not only at home though. Did you know anytime you use public Wi-Fi, whether it's a local coffee shop or a hotel while you're traveling, your data is vulnerable over that connection? For example, even though the Wi-Fi you connect to may say the coffee shop's name, it might actually be some dodgy guy sitting in the car park who's actually set up a fake hotspot to try and capture unsuspecting people's banking details and social media passwords. But with NordVPN switched on, even if you do connect to a dodgy Wi-Fi hotspot, your connection is encrypted and secure. If you want to enjoy the benefits of NordVPN as well, when you use my link, you'll get a huge discount on a 2-year plan, plus 4 additional bonus months. It's risk-free with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee, and it's the best deal you'll get on the internet. Get it at nordvpn.com/Turner, or click on the link in the description. After voluntarily burning myself several times, we finally got a break in the cloud to allow us to give this its first test. To begin with, I thought it would be good just to try out boiling water. It takes a bit to get all the angles right, especially when you've already been bitten on the arm by it and you're trying to avoid the beam. But eventually, I got everything in the perfect position and we were ready to go.
Wow.
Okay, this seems to be quite a downside to solar cooking. I ended up having to eat cold water for dinner, but the next day, the weather was looking good. A little bit too good. So I got everything set up again and checked the focus. Now I'm not sure which specific thing I messed up here. Probably a multitude of errors, like not allowing for the fact that the sun is not a halogen light bolted to the roof of my shed, but the focus was completely out. However, I ended up making up a clamp so I could adjust the height of the pot on the pole. Once it was perfectly in focus, I left it to heat up. I waited a fair while, but it was barely getting any heat into it. The pot was only getting to around 60 degrees, so it looks like we're going to end up with a bacterial-filled meal. However, I think the main issue seemed to be the Fresnel lens, which was diffused on the non-lens side, causing it to scatter the light and lose some energy. So that night, I committed to sanding the texture off one side of the lens, using several grades of sandpaper to make it more transparent, which was a pain of a job. I went to polish it afterward, but couldn't find my car polisher, which I remembered I repurposed as a hedge trimmer. Once I restored the polisher and finished the job, the lens looked a lot more clear. The next morning, I was ready to try it out with the polished lens. With a lot more light being focused on the bottom of the pot, I was now measuring about 130 degrees. And it didn't take too much longer after that for the water to start boiling. However, the heat isn't even and it's focused in a pinpoint on the bottom. But that is where we have an advantage in using the pressure cooker. I put the lid on to see if it would get to pressure and then left it for a few minutes. And that's sounding really good. We're ready to make a meal. Kristen has kindly prepared all the ingredients for us to mix up and test out, which includes spring onion, mushrooms, the weird shaped pumpkin that looks like an hourglass, some mixed beans including the ones that look like little butts, red lentils and rice, and some brown water that smells nice. I've then used my imprecise measuring skills to mix the ingredients together in the pot. Then I chucked it on our solar stove. It took about 15 minutes to start boiling, but once it did, I closed the valve and sat inside and waited for a brown explosion of water. But in the end, it seemed to be working pretty well. After about 6 minutes, I moved the light off the bottom and released the pressure valve. It actually tasted really good. When the sun finally behaved, it cooked a decent sized meal without needing much attention. A solid win for lazy chefs who have a huge power bill. In the end though, you could say it isn't the most practical way to cook. The clouds, the moving sun, and the occasional smell of burnt hair from accidentally walking through the beam. That said though, as a concept, using a solar furnace to pressure cook your dinner is a pretty interesting idea. Just remember to always switch it off when you're done though.
Okay, now be angry.
What?